We are going to kick off this little panel with comments from Angel Gurría, the Secretary General of the OECD, President?
Secretary General.
Secretary General.
It's a Soviet title.
Okay. For just a few minutes, and then we'll get our esteemed panelists up here.
Okay. Ambassador Thompson, ladies and gentlemen, the iconic ocean explorer Jacques Cousteau once said that for most of history, man has had to fight nature to survive. In this century, man's beginning to realize that in order to survive, he must protect nature. Now, unfortunately, in spite of this knowledge, we are failing in our duty to protect the planet. The case of the oceans is central to this drama. Every minute one garbage truck of plastic is dumped into the sea. By 2030, it'll be 2 garbage trucks. By 2050, it'll be 4 garbage trucks. And by that time, as is now almost a cliche, the oceans will have more plastic in weight than fish. I mean, it's so absolutely just difficult to fathom. Whole ecosystems are under threat from unsustainable fishing, the mining of marine resources, habitat destruction, pollution, climate change. The IPCC report, global warming of 1.5 degree centigrade, projects that coral reefs could decline by between 70 and 90% if the global warming is 1.5%. That's a success. That's a big success target. But if it were 2 degrees, not 1.5, 2 degrees, it's only 1/2 degree more, that would eradicate 99% of the coral reefs. Massive, massive. Without bold climate action, we'll all witness within our lifetimes the loss of an entire ecosystem. Healthy oceans are fundamental for the future welfare and prosperity of mankind. The oceans define the nature of our blue planet. They are the largest source of life and support rich biodiversity. They're also an important carbon sink, absorbing about 1/3 of anthropogenic emissions. The ocean also holds immense resource wealth and great potential for supporting economic growth, for supporting employment, development. The OECD projects that the ocean economy could double in size from 2010 to 2030, reaching 3 trillion and employing 40 million people. Coral ecosystems alone provide over $170 billion a year to the world economy through food and raw materials, water purification, recreation, tourism, and the maintenance of diversity. The ocean economy spans several industries: oil and gas, fishing, shipping, tourism, offshore wind energy, marine biotechnology. It's large, but it's also growing very fast. We must ensure that all policies, finance, and institutional arrangements that impact the ocean are well aligned, that they are coherent, that they are mutually reinforcing, that they're efficient, effective, that advance progress towards achieving the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goal number 14, otherwise known as life below water. At the OECD, we advocate a whole-of-government approach, focusing on 5 key priority areas for a healthy ocean economy. First, ensuring the health and resilience of marine biodiversity and the ecosystem services. We recently published work that focused on the effective policy and financing approaches for marine protected areas. Our current priority is to help governments identify, assess, and manage subsidies that are harmful to marine biodiversity. The second is waging a war on plastic pollution. Last year, we launched a major report on improving markets for recycled plastics. It takes a holistic value chain approach to the problem of ocean plastics. We all need to up our game on this. both in terms of prevention, but also in terms of cleaning up what's already there. So we have to, I was speaking to Peter about, creating, biodegradable, that's to stop the addition. But of course, there's already, proverbial knowledge now, the size of Texas or whatever it is, that is already floating in the ocean. The third is putting fisheries and agriculture on a sustainable footing. The OECD is working particularly to track policies, to track practices that can deter illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Then, harnessing science, technology, and innovation. We're witnessing game-changing advances in areas like subsea engineering, subsea technology, sensors, imaging, big data analytics, autonomous systems, biotechnology, nanotechnology. And we at the OECD were working to link it up ocean industries, marine ecosystems, and national accounts in order to boost ocean science, to boost ocean research, and to boost ocean-related innovation networks. Next month in Portugal, the OECD will present its new report called Rethinking Innovation in the Ocean Economy. We just, all the time, we work under Peter's control. So now, last but not least, we have to support developing countries. Building on our report called Making Development Cooperation Work for Small Islands. Big issue with small islands. The OECD has just launched a new initiative bringing together expertise on development finance, innovation, and the environment to explore how to increase the sustainability of the ocean economy and harness its benefits for developing countries. So, Ambassador, dear friends, the oceans need a voice. Desperately. The ocean is looking for a voice. It is the most powerful, the most beautiful thing we've ever seen, the most expressive, relevant miracle of nature. But it lacks a voice to defend itself from us. So let's be that voice. Let's raise that voice. And let's say it loud and clear. We have to collaborate across all fronts, in all sectors, to protect the ocean, to coexist with a healthy and biodiversity-rich ocean, to have a strong, smart, sustainable ocean economy. Because now, today, as we speak, it's literally sink or swim. So count on the OECD. Work with us. We will work with you and for you to save the oceans. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Mr. Gurría. And I'd like to invite up our panelists, 3 voices for the ocean. Do we have everyone here? Great. Greta Thunberg, the world-renowned climate activist. We have Katherine Garrett-Cox, who's the CEO of Gulf International Bank. She'll help us provide that crucial perspective from the financial sector. And last but not least, Sharan Burrow, the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. Thank you all for being here today. And this is the first panel I've been on at Davos where it's all women. So. Book ended by men, however. Greta, let's begin with you because I know you have to leave. Tell us why you are here at Davos.
I am here because I got an invitation, and I thought that this is not something I want to say no to, because this is an amazing opportunity to get out my message and to impact people and to get more attention to the climate crisis.
You, perhaps more than any other climate activists working right now, have galvanized the attention of the world. You have students striking across borders, and you're a personal inspiration to them. One of the things I heard you say earlier is that you would like to see change from business leaders, from people here. Specifically, what would you like to see?
I would see that that people somehow realize the emergency of the situation, and that we realize what needs to be done, and that we speak clearly and to not try to quiet it down, and then act from there.
And do you think business leaders have a specific responsibility?
Yes, I mean, everyone has a responsibility, more or less, but the bigger your platform is, the bigger your carbon footprint is, the bigger your power is, the more responsibility you have.
Absolutely. We have, part of this panel right now is not only to lay out the challenges facing the oceans, which many of us are aware of, but also to put on our green eye shades and look at it as an economic issue. This is, as Mr. Gurría said, a massive economic powerhouse. The oceans sustain dozens of industries, and it is 24 trillion in assets. And I imagine that will be scaled up over the years. So, Sharan, how do we think about the oceans, not only in terms of from a moral standpoint, as Greta is saying, we have an obligation to protect these, but how do we think of them as a workforce sustaining entity?
Well, it's an enormous workforce that actually works in and around to support the use and the exploitation often, but the industries that are supported by the oceans. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you, because I do understand that there was a collaboration here earlier this week about eliminating legal fishing in the Pacific, and that means eliminating slavery, because in our supply chains today, which are, you know, an old model of trade that has to go, we'll have supply chains, but they can no longer be exploitative, dehumanising, and so in that context, if you eliminate illegal fishing, you do something good for the ocean, but you actually do something good for people who are the exploited of the exploited. So thank you. And in fact, it was quite a joke with people like Jim Leap and Kumi and I, because we've been collaborators on the climate front for a long time now, and indeed they're talking about slavery and fishing, and I said yes, and somehow I'm doing your oceans panel, and what do I know about oceans, but except that we have to clean them up and we have to take responsibility. But in fact, there are things that we are doing, and something I'd like to suggest that we collaborate around. If you take all the support for logistics, transport and logistics, you know, I co-hosted Davos today on Tuesday morning, and the CEO of Dubai World, the ports operators, was on the panel, and I think I unfairly kind of hit him from left field, but I asked him the question, if Maersk as a company has made a commitment to net zero as a shipping company, then what does that mean? How are you matching that, and how are you providing for that in your port architecture? And in fact, well, you know, I got a kind of blah blah answer, but it's true. We have to look at what are the support systems for the industrial base of the ocean, even just the environmental base of the ocean. You know, I come from so that's huge. And last night, I must say, I was delighted to get the report on industry that shows that you can get net zero in every industry, including transport and logistics. So we've got to make that happen. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I come from Australia. I mean, what more can I say? Look at, they're trying to build a coal mine on the most pristine part of my country. It makes me so cranky that, actually makes me really sad because it's beautiful. Who's been to the Barrier Reef? I mean, climate change will lose us the Barrier Reef, but we don't have to lose it more quickly than we are going to. And to pollute it in that way is just evil.
Well,
it's just
and that's
evil.
a great point, that the Barrier Reef actually produces more economic revenue in terms of jobs and tourism than it does through...
Oh, absolutely. The coal mining jobs are nothing compared to the circular nature of that economy, through tourism, through basic industry, through environmental protection and so on. But the other thing I wanted to put on the table is I was thinking about, well, apart from, the general support of activities, and I'm a lobbyist for reducing plastic to the point where, if Europe doesn't ban single-use plastic, then we might organise a strike with our young people around that, because it's an embarrassment, everywhere. But when I go to the supermarket and I have no choice but to buy the containers that these products are in, it just makes you, again, really mad. So we've got to do something on that. But finally, we do have 37 trillion of workers' capital, pension funds invested in the global economy. Now, we've done investor briefs in collaboration around just transitions for climate to shift investment and make sure workers are looked after and so on. But we haven't actually talked about whatever you might want to call it, blue bonds. How do we differentiate money that goes into ocean to ocean repair to mitigation?
I want to get into that, and specifically how the financial sector, it benefits from that, and there can be so many synergies in that world. But we are going to lose Greta in just a minute because she's got to run off to her next event. Certainly the celebrity among us today. But not for a bad reason, because you have lived your morals. You are a vegan. You took 36 hours worth of trains to be here.
I think 32, 33.
32. And last night you slept outdoors or?
In a tent.
In a tent.
Whoa.
And then how cold was it?
It was minus 18 degrees.
Ooh.
How
was your sleeping bag?
It was warm.
Okay, good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I do want to know from you, in a problem like this that requires partnerships between governments and corporations, we also need the people. And how do you propose that we motivate people like you to throw their weight, to throw their voices behind this issue?
I think what we first need to realize is that people in general don't know about this issue. They know the planet is warming because of greenhouse gas emissions caused by humans, and that may cause glaciers melting, the ice melting, and more extreme weather. But they don't know the consequences of that. They don't know what a tipping point is. They don't know what the Keeling curve is. And they don't know what we need to do to prevent it. And so I think we need to sort of educate people and try to inform them, because people aren't, I don't believe humans are evil. We are continuing doing like this because we are uninformed. We don't know about this. We aren't evil.
So as soon as people know about this, then they will strike?
I mean, they first need to know, and then we also need to start treating this crisis as a crisis. We see it as a problem that needs to be fixed with technical solutions and mitigation, but it's so much more than that. It's an existential crisis, and we need to do everything in our power to stop it. And so we need to first see it as a crisis and treat it as a crisis. Absolutely.
So in terms of those technical solutions, and that's where these two ladies will come into the discussion. If you could wave your magic wand and get the people at Davos to do one thing, what would you have them do?
I would have them to speak clearly to tell them to make them tell it like it is, to make them tell how much we actually need to reduce our emissions and what that will require from us as individuals, but also as nations and companies.
Right. Yep. I would add to that, because sometimes people hear best with their pocketbooks, that if we don't save the oceans, that is a $24 trillion loss. So, Katherine, when you are talking to folks in your industry, how do you describe the need to do good in this world?
Well, it's not always easy. I have to say, I have been in finance for nearly 30 years, and for the last 15, I've been a very strong advocate, promoter, and manager of sustainable and responsible investment funds. And I can honestly tell you that 15 years ago, it felt very lonely. We, in my previous role at Aviva, we were one of the very first signatories to the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment back in 2006. And back then, I mean, it was sort of, a few people in a room putting their signature to a piece of paper. Now we have a situation where 2019, there are over 2,000 signatories representing over $80 trillion. That sounds great. My real issue is, do they actually believe it? So to Greta's point, let's not beat around the bush. Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England, described climate change as the tragedy of the horizon. And I think my call to action is that we as business leaders, as investors, as bankers, we need to find solutions, and they do exist. The Seychelles issued the first ever blue bond. It was a $15 million 10-year bond, but it's been hard yards. 2008, the World Bank issued the first green bond. Unilever led from the front by issuing their first green bond to offset their carbon footprint. Stepping out in front of everyone else is not always easy. But I think, my perspective on this is very fundamental. So my wonderful husband, who's in the audience, and I have 4 children around Greta's age. And about 4 years ago, we were very fortunate enough to join a National Geographic expedition to the Galapagos Islands. And that was a really nice idea, and what we wanted to do is to show them what the pristine seas look like, because we had a very strong feeling that when they get to our age, it may not be the same. And on one of the walks on one of the islands, a number of us came across a small baby seal. It was alive, but only just. It was effectively being garroted by a fishing net. And can you imagine what it felt like when we saw this seal in desperate stakes? And the reality is that fishing nets contribute significantly to ocean plastics, and it was very, very stark. So my children and a few of us then watched a number of people, including my husband, basically clamber over some very scary rocks to basically cut this net off a live baby seal. I think it's something that will stay with my children forever. And most importantly, Greta speaks to, we have to stand up and do something and leave a legacy. And probably our proudest moment was when our children came back from that expedition, and our son, who at the age was about 15, stood up in front of his classmates at boarding school, gave a presentation to about 140 boys, and basically talked to them about marine conservation. And that's when you know you've made a difference.
Yeah, we'll give that a round of applause. Greta, do you think we're at a turning point?
No, but I think we are getting closer to a turning point. I mean, it's the year 2020, we must bend the curve steep down. And there's no second option.
Sharan, do you think that we are at a point of being able to organize as people rather than as governments or corporations?
Well, I don't think we have a choice because, while the world is increasingly more authoritarian, even in democratic countries, nevertheless, we still have a basic liberal democracy infrastructure in most of our countries. So unless we are actually challenging politicians because we're organising, and not just a demand of them, but that we're actually collaborating too. And there are some great collaborations. And I mean, people are inspired by Greta, but she's right that if you don't educate, if this isn't part of everyday conversation, if people aren't, crying over the sense that the crisis is so imminent, then we are in trouble. So we've got 3 opportunities now, and oceans is clearly part of the mix. But in September, you have the UN General Secretary's Summit. We want people on the streets. It should be led by young people because, that's the responsibility we hold in an intergenerational sense, and you're right about that. But we need to be on the streets everywhere, because otherwise it will be just a UN meeting inside a room and people will make pledges, but you will not do what Greta's demanding of us and both raise the consciousness level but actually give people something that they feel they can fight about. The second thing the second point we have is back here next year. And if this isn't the most significant demand for scaling up ambition in the year that Greta says is potentially the turning point or potentially the point at which we seal our fate, then I don't know, what else. But between those things, the collaborations have to be enormous. Many businesses have said net zero. I'm part of the B team. All the B team leaders have committed to net zero. We showed last night with the Adair Turner's work that, in fact, which spun off out of a fight actually in the new climate economy. I'm very proud of the new climate economy's work. But I lost the first round. I didn't get industry in there. It was kind of in other. They came back to it though, and now the work is there and it's possible. So every sector can get to net zero. And we've got to make it happen.
One thing that's been striking about hearing the 3 of you talk, coming from very different perspectives, is the visceral nature of you mentioned the Great Barrier Reef, just the visceral beauty of that, the seal being choked to death, and that galvanizing your children to act. And Greta, I don't know what originally motivated you to become a climate warrior, but you are viscerally inspiring others right now who see your actions and your commitment to the cause. What are some 3 concrete things, and I'd like to hear from all 3 of you, what are 3 concrete things that we can do right now that we can tell people this is a way to invest, this is a technology to invest in, or this is a way to support workers and jobs, or this is a way to motivate people? What do we do right now for the oceans and for climate? Greta, you go first.
As individuals?
As individuals.
I mean, it's a very difficult question because most emissions are caused by companies and not by individuals. So as an individual, I think the best you can do is talk to others, spread information, and just go out on the streets and put pressure on people in power. And also there are many things you can do as an individual, like in our everyday life, like stop flying, go vegan, stop buying new things, sell your car, and so. But yeah, since most emissions aren't caused by individuals, that is, I mean, one person stop flying doesn't make that much difference. But to stop flying is a political action, and to try to push the political movement and to inspire others to do the same and push the political movement. So that is not something you do to reduce your own carbon emissions, of course that as well, but mostly to push the political movement.
Sharan, how about you go next?
Well, I think transport and logistics, that's one thing we will work on. Our ITF, our International Transport Federation, has already a partnership with us with the C40 group of cities, and they're committed to the clean streets, but we've been talking about what that means in ocean terms, and they've set up an office both in aviation and with the IMO to look at the collaboration there. So transport and logistics, absolutely. The second thing I think is what do we do about, how do we educate people that the oceans, like the forests, are part of our global commons, and what does that look like in terms of the people who look after, from a worker's perspective, Indigenous people in the Amazon, you know, who are the workers we should be saying have responsibility for harvesting. You know, it could be our fishers folk, it could be the people in, you know, who are living around the shorelines or in pristine places. But we need to figure out what a different notion of work to protect the global commons looks like. And the third thing is I want to do more on shifting the money. And I feel we have a particular responsibility to do that. We've done it with the PRI and with ourselves in a major way, or are beginning to do it in a major way in the broader climate piece. But we should have a specific look at what it would take and where it should be shifted in terms of oceans.
Thank you. And Katherine.
So I think very much building on what the other panelists have said. I mean, I think my three suggestions would be, firstly, shine a light on good practice, because businesses are doing things for good. There are hugely exciting new developments around plastics technology. I'm sure you will have walked past the Ice House in Davos this year. That was designed by a Saudi headquartered company called SABIC, who this morning announced a new technology which will effectively make all plastics 100% recyclable for some of their customers. I mean, that is groundbreaking stuff. So shine a light on that. The second thing I would say, building on what Sharan said, is actually we collectively have a responsibility around our own money. Don't sit and think that it's someone else's responsibility. All of us have savings, have investments. Ask the questions. Go and ask your advisors. Vote with your feet. I see this as absolutely, to Greta's point, the tipping point is going to be when power shifts from corporates to consumers, and that's us. So don't sit and wait for it to happen. You know, I think this is a real moment, and it can be done. So in my previous company, we actually carbon footprinted our entire portfolio, and we were able to demonstrate that it emitted 60% less CO2 than the mainstream benchmarks, and we made higher returns. So don't think for a second that by saving the oceans, your pension fund won't help you to live a sustainable future. So, and I think my last point is practice what you preach. We have a shining example here in Greta in terms of somebody who passionately believes that we need to leave the world a better place for our children. So don't just sit and think about it. Don't talk. We've heard the call to action from the Secretary General. Oceans don't have a voice. That is our responsibility. So lead by example and do it now.
Thank you so much. Before everyone goes, we can give our panelists a round of applause, and then I would like to invite up Peter Thompson, who's going to give us some concluding remarks, the UN Special Envoy for the Oceans.
Hey everybody, I'm sure you'll agree that was very moving, and thanks to our all-female panel, and especially to Greta for representing the youth so strongly. Look, I think it's been a wonderful day, the first Ocean Day here at Davos. It's incredible when you think about what has been covered today. From blue tech startups, nature-based solutions, high seas governance, plastic pollution, slavery-free fisheries, illegal fishing, and that was just today. But it's been going on all week. We started with plastic pollution, then Sir David Attenborough, of course, everything that he did. Ecosystem protection has been really big this week, New Deal for Nature, and the blue economy, of course. And one never says blue economy these days without saying sustainable blue economy, and I was very glad that the Secretary General of OECD put that sustainable word in front of ocean economy, as he called it. I've promised everybody that I'll just say a few words, and these are the few words I want to say. Firstly, I really want to thank the panelists. I sat there all day. I had other things I was supposed to do in Davos, but I wasn't leaving because each panel, I looked, my God, what? She's coming, he's coming. Well, I have to sit in on that. So it's been a fantastic day in terms of the panelists. I also really want to thank the members of the Friends of Ocean Action, these 50 or so thought leaders. And we had one of them here today with Daniela Fernandez. Daniela, thanks so much for pushing us through the day and keeping us the time and asking the relevant questions, watched, of course, by the world. So you did a great job. I also want to say a special word of thanks to our landlord and also our first benefactor for Friends of Ocean Action. When we started it here in Davos just a year ago, it blows my mind to think about that, because we've achieved so much with this Friends of Ocean Action over the last year. And that's Mark Benioff and Salesforce. A huge round of thanks to them for that. And they're going to kill me before I leave Davos, but because I was told definitely I wasn't allowed to do it. But the WEF WRI team, led by Christian Telecki, they've just done such a great job in putting all this together. They are based in Geneva and in London and in Washington, where they pull together in this really tight team, which is making the various action platforms that the Friends of Ocean Action have put in place now actually happen. So really a big round of thanks to them as well. So folks, that's really it. After everything that's gone on this week and today, I just can't wait to get off this mountain, Not that I don't love Davos, wink, wink, but I can't wait to get off this mountain, because there is so much SDG 14 work. And don't forget, we've got 4 targets in SDG 14 maturing next year, when I hope to see you all in Lisbon in the first week of June. Not yet mandated by the United Nations, but they will. For this second UN Ocean Conference, when we will hold ourselves accountable, the world will hold itself accountable on the 4 targets which exist in SDG 14 that mature in 2020. So that's what raises in my mind the fact that I got to get off this mountain, because from everything we've heard this week and all the good solutions that have come up, I have 3 things to do, and I hope it's the same for all of you. And those 3 things are action, action, and action. Thank you.